If God is real, where's the proof? And if he's not, then why do billions still believe? Some say faith is just wishful thinking. Others argue that God's existence is the most logical explanation for reality. But who's right? In this video, we're diving deep into one of the oldest and most controversial debates in history, atheism versus theism. If you're ready to explore both sides of the argument, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's uncover the truth. Welcome to the channel where we dive into true crime, history, and religion's most controversial moments. Alright, before we jump into the big question, is there proof of God? Let's make sure we're on the same page about what we're actually debating. The atheism versus theism debate is one of the longest-running arguments in human history. It has shaped science, philosophy, culture, and even what kind of memes people post on the internet. And trust me, both sides have strong opinions. Atheism, in simple terms, is the nah, I don't buy it approach to God. Atheists generally fall into two camps. One is the hardcore atheist, also known as strong atheism. They say God doesn't exist. Period. Case closed, move on. Second is the skeptical atheist, also known as weak atheism, or agnostic. They're more like, I'm not saying God definitely doesn't exist, but I haven't seen enough proof to believe in one. Do you know that atheists don't necessarily claim to have absolute proof that God isn't real, because proving a negative is tricky, but they argue that the burden of proof is on believers. Basically, they say, hey, if you're claiming there's an all-powerful being running the universe, you need to show me some solid evidence. Otherwise, why should I believe it any more than, say, Zeus, the flying spaghetti monster, or Santa Claus? Atheism isn't a one-size-fits-all deal. It comes in different flavors. First, we have philosophical atheism, the brainy kind. These folks say, logically speaking, the idea of God just doesn't add up. They treat God like a math problem that doesn't quite solve. Then there's scientific atheism, the show me the evidence crew. Their motto? Everything we see can be explained by nature and science, no gods required. If it's not in a lab report, they're not buying it.
Also, we have practical atheism, the who cares approach. These people aren't necessarily against the idea of God, but they live as if he's on an extended vacation and never checking in.
Some atheists think religion was just a way for people to feel better about life's uncertainties, like a cosmic security blanket. Others argue that science and reason are better at answering life's big questions than ancient religious texts ever could. Now, on the other side, we have theism, the nope, God is real, and he, or they, is running the show perspective. Theists believe that life, the universe, and even our sense of right and wrong make the most sense if there's a higher power behind it all. And just like atheism, theism comes in different flavors. First, there's monotheism, the belief in one all-powerful God. Think Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Basically, one supreme CEO of the universe, calling all the shots. Then we've got polytheism, the idea that multiple gods exist, each handling different cosmic departments. This was big in ancient Greece and Rome, and it's still found in Hinduism today. Picture a divine team of specialists, one god for war, one for love, one for thunder, basically the original Avengers. And finally, there's deism, the belief that a creator made the universe but doesn't interfere. Think of it like a cosmic clockmaker who built the world, wound it up, and then said, all right, you guys figure it out. Theists argue that believing in God isn't just about feeling warm and fuzzy inside. It's about looking at the universe, morality, and the countless personal experiences people have had and saying, yep, this all points to something bigger. At this point, you might be thinking, all right, cool, but why does any of this matter? Well, what you believe about God actually shapes how you see everything. From your morning coffee to the meaning of life. Think about it. First, morality. Are good and evil actual things? Or did humans just make up a rule book and call it right and wrong? Then there's purpose. Are we here for a reason, or are we just the universe's version of a happy accident? Like when you mix two sodas and accidentally create something amazing. What about the universe itself? Was it designed by something or someone? Or did it just randomly come together, like a cosmic Lego set without instructions? And of course, the big one, death and the afterlife. Do we go somewhere after this life, or do we just, poof, disappear like a Snapchat message? This is why the debate over God isn't just an abstract argument for philosophy nerds. It actually shapes how we live, what we value, and even how we treat each other. So, with that in mind, What do both sides have to say about the evidence? Let's break it down. All right, let's get real for a second. Atheists have one big question. If God is real, why does he play hide and seek? I mean, if you had unlimited power and wanted people to believe in you, wouldn't you just show up? Maybe drop a message in the sky? Or I don't know, interrupt live TV with, "Hey, it's me, God, just checking in." But that doesn't happen. Instead, belief in God still relies on faith, not clear, undeniable proof. And for many atheists, that's a major red flag. Atheists usually point to three big reasons why they don't believe in God. 1. The problem of evil. Why does God allow suffering? This one's a classic. If God is all-powerful and all-loving, then why is the world such a mess? Seriously, if he had the power to stop all suffering, why wouldn't he? Let's break it down. Natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, basically nature going full apocalypse mode, innocent people, even kids, suffer and die. If God made the world, why build it with built-in destruction? Human evil. Wars, crime, dictators, and history's greatest hits of horrible people. If God truly cares about morality, why does he let evil people thrive while good people struggle? People pray for help, whether it's for healing, money, or just a break from life kicking them in the face, and yet silence. If God is a loving father, why does he ghost his children when they need him most? Some atheists say this proves God doesn't exist, while others think it at least makes him look bad at his job. Now, theists respond by saying things like suffering is a test. God works in mysterious ways. Free will is important. But atheists often see these answers as excuses rather than real explanations. If God can create anything, why didn't he just make a perfect world from the start? Atheists like to say, "Show me the evidence." And when they ask for proof of God, they want more than just feelings or ancient texts. They want something solid, like a miracle on camera, a scientific experiment proving divine intervention, or even just a clear sign that isn't up for interpretation. Here's why they think God fails the test. God cannot be measured. Science is based on observation and testing. But when it comes to God, there's nothing to observe, no cosmic fingerprints, no divine footprints. Miracles are unverifiable. Sure, people claim miracles happen. But has there ever been a scientifically proven miracle? Not really. Most so-called miracles can be explained by medicine, psychology, or just sheer coincidence. Religious belief depends on geography. If God were obvious, wouldn't everyone believe in the same one? Instead, people tend to believe in the God of their culture. Born in India, probably Hindu, Saudi Arabia, likely Muslim, USA, probably Christian. That pattern makes it look like religion is a human invention, not divine truth. Atheists often compare belief in God to believing in ghosts, fairies, or the Loch Ness monster. Just because people want it to be true doesn't mean it is. Now, some theists argue back, saying, not everything can be tested by science. Love, emotions, and consciousness exist, and you can't put them in a test tube. God reveals himself in personal experiences, not lab experiments. But atheists respond with, yeah, but love and consciousness do show up in brain activity and human behavior. God, not so much. At the end of the day, atheists believe that if God were real and obvious, there wouldn't even be a debate. However, is that the full story? Is there truly no evidence for God? Or are there signs that point to a creator? All right, let's flip the script. While atheists argue that there's no real evidence for God, theists say, hold on a second, there are signs of a creator everywhere. You just have to know where to look. Now, they're not saying you can put God under a microscope or send a drone to heaven for a sneak peek, but they argue that there are clues, big, flashing neon signs that point to an intelligent creator. Let's check out the three biggest ones. 1. The fine-tuning of the universe. Cosmic coincidence or grand design. Imagine you're walking through the woods and stumble upon a smartphone lying on the ground. Would you assume it just randomly assembled itself over millions of years, with the screen, battery, and apps all magically coming together? Of course not. Someone had to design it. Theists say the same logic applies to the universe. Gravity is so perfectly tuned that if it were just a tiny bit weaker, everything would drift apart. If it were just a bit stronger, the whole universe would collapse into a black hole. Yikes, atoms, the tiny building blocks of everything, are held together in a ridiculously precise way. If their balance was even slightly off, matter as we know it wouldn't exist. The cosmological constant, which controls how fast the universe expands, is fine-tuned to an accuracy of 1 in 10 to the power of 120. A number so crazy, it makes winning the lottery every day for 1 billion years look like child's play. Theists argue that this kind of precision screams design. If you saw the words, "Welcome to Earth" written in the sand, you wouldn't think the waves randomly formed them, you'd assume someone wrote it. So why assume the universe, which is way more complex, just popped into existence by accident? Some scientists try to explain this by saying, maybe there are infinite universes, and we just happen to land in the one that works. That's like saying, I didn't cheat on the test. There are just 1 billion alternate realities where I actually studied. Possible, maybe. But is it the best explanation? Theists say no. 2. The origin of life and consciousness. Can science explain it all? Science is amazing. It can tell us how stars explode, how babies are born, and even why we cry when cutting onions. But one thing science still can't fully explain is how life started in the first place. Now let's examine some points. 1. DNA. The instruction manual for life is basically a super advanced computer code. Except instead of programmers writing it, nature somehow figured it out. Or did it? Theists ask, if something as simple as a website needs a designer, how can DNA way more complex exist without one? 2. Abiogenesis. The idea that life came from non-living matter is still a mystery. Even in high-tech labs with brilliant scientists, we can't create life from scratch. But somehow, it supposedly happened by accident? 3. Ever heard of irreducible complexity? Some biological systems like the human eye or the bacterial flagellum, basically a microscopic outboard motor, need all their parts to work at once. If just one part is missing, the whole thing fails. Theists argue that such systems couldn't have evolved piece by piece. They had to be designed from the start. And then there's consciousness. Humans are the only creatures that wonder about life, morality, and what happens after death. No offense to your dog, but he's not losing sleep over philosophy. If we're just biological machines, why do we have free will, emotions, and moral values? Why do we feel guilt, love, and the need for justice? Theists argue that these things point to something beyond the physical, a soul perhaps. If humans were just highly evolved animals, we'd only care about food, survival, and reproduction. But instead, we write poetry, build cathedrals, and argue about the meaning of life. Why? Theists say it's because we were made by a creator with purpose. 3. Personal experiences and miracles. Are millions of people just delusional? Now this is where things get really interesting, because even if you ignore fine-tuning and DNA, there's one thing you can't just brush off: personal experience. Millions of people throughout history, from ancient times to today, claim to have encountered God in some way. Are they all just imagining things? First up, near-death experiences, those crazy stories where people are clinically dead but somehow come back. Many report seeing heaven, meeting a divine being, or floating above their own bodies. Some say it's just the brain freaking out. But here's the weird part. Some of these people correctly describe things that happened in the room while they were unconscious. How does that work? Glitch in the Matrix? Then we have answered prayers, when someone prays for a miracle, and boom, something super unlikely happens. A sickness vanishes, a job offer appears out of nowhere, or they find their car keys in the fridge. Coincidence? Theists say no. And then there are miracles, stories of people beating terminal illnesses with no medical explanation, surviving disasters in ways that make no sense, or experiencing things that shouldn't be possible. Skeptics roll their eyes and say, that's just luck, psychology, or wishful thinking. But theists fire back with some tough questions. If miracles aren't real, why do people all over the world keep reporting them? Why do some skeptics who set out to disprove God end up changing their minds because of personal experiences? If we trust eyewitnesses in court, why do we ignore them when they talk about spiritual experiences? Theists don't claim they have a selfie with God, but when you put all these things together, they say it paints a pretty strong picture. The universe seems too perfectly designed to be random, so maybe, just maybe, someone designed it. Life and consciousness are too complex to be an accident. And millions of people claim to have personally experienced God in ways that science can't fully explain. Now, does all of this prove God's existence beyond all doubt? Not necessarily. But theists argue that it makes a lot more sense than the idea that we're just cosmic accidents floating on a tiny rock in space. The real question is the evidence for God strong enough for you to believe? All right, let's get straight to the big question. Is there any actual proof that God is real? Well, That depends on what you mean by proof. If you're thinking of a science experiment where we mix a few chemicals, zap them with electricity, and suddenly, boom, God materializes in a lab. Sorry to disappoint. Science doesn't quite work that way. But if by proof you mean logic, history, philosophy, and personal experience, then a lot of people argue that the case for God is actually pretty strong. So why can't we just settle this with science? Science is amazing. It gave us smartphones, space travel, and even the ability to deep fry Oreos, which is a miracle in itself. But it has limits, and detecting God is one of them. Science deals with things we can see, touch, and measure. Atoms, galaxies, dinosaurs, the weird mold in your fridge. But God, if he exists, is said to be outside of space and time. That's like asking a video game character to find the person holding the controller. It's just not how the system works. And just because science hasn't found God doesn't mean he's not there. Think about it. There was a time when science had no idea about black holes, germs, or quantum physics. But they still existed. Saying science hasn't found God, therefore he's not real, is like a fish saying, I have never seen Wi-Fi, so it must not exist. Then there's the bigger issue. Science is really good at answering how things happen. How planets orbit, how life evolves, how your favorite pizza gets delivered in under 30 minutes. But the question of God isn't just a how question, it's a why question. Why does the universe exist at all? Why do we have a sense of right and wrong? Why do we even care about meaning and purpose? These are big picture questions that science alone might not be able to fully answer. And that's where philosophy, logic, and personal experience come in. If we can't put God in a petri dish, does that mean believing in him is just wishful thinking? Not necessarily. Many believers argue that while science can't directly test for God, other forms of evidence make his existence not just possible, but actually quite likely. One common approach is through logic and philosophy. Some of the strongest arguments for God's existence aren't based on faith alone, but on reasoning that makes you stop and think, wait, that actually makes sense. Take the first cause argument, also known as the cosmological argument. It goes like this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe had a beginning, thanks Big Bang, so it must have had a cause too. And that cause, many argue, is God. The universe didn't just randomly throw itself a surprise birthday party. It had to come from something. Then there's the fine-tuning argument. The universe is so precisely set up for life that even the tiniest change in the laws of physics would make existence impossible. The odds of this happening by pure chance? Astronomically low, like winning the lottery 1 trillion times in a row. That's why many believe this level of precision suggests an intelligent designer rather than a lucky accident. And what about morality? We all instinctively know that some things are objectively right or wrong. Murder isn't just a personal dislike, it's truly wrong. But where does this moral compass come from? If there's an objective moral law, many argue there must be a moral lawgiver behind it, God. None of these arguments prove God's existence with 100% certainty, but they make the idea of God not just a possibility, but a logical and reasonable conclusion. Philosophy is cool and all, but what about actual history? Many believers argue that history itself gives us clues that God is real. Take Jesus, for example. His life, death, and supposed resurrection are some of the most debated events in history. Even non-Christian scholars agree that something weird happened after he died. His followers went from scared and hiding to boldly spreading his message, even at the cost of their lives. Either they witnessed something incredible, or they were really committed to an elaborate prank. Then there's the whole miracle thing. Billions of people across different cultures from ancient times to today have claimed to witness healings, visions, or divine encounters. Either they're all lying, all hallucinating, or just maybe there's something beyond what science can measure. And don't forget religion's impact on the world. Civilization, moral laws, human rights. Many argue these weren't just random human inventions, but were shaped by belief in God. Even the idea that human life has value comes largely from religious traditions. Could all of this be a giant coincidence, or does it point to something bigger? Now let's talk personal experiences, because let's be honest, this is where things get real. Millions of people claim to have felt God's presence, had prayers answered, or even seen miracles. Some hardcore atheists, like C.S. Lewis, completely changed their minds after experiencing something they just couldn't ignore. Near-death experiences, radical life transformations. These are things science struggles to fully explain. Of course, skeptics will say, that's just psychology, coincidence, or wishful thinking. But with so many people, from different times and backgrounds, telling similar stories, is it really just in their heads? Or is there something more? This is where faith and reason collide. Atheists often say, if I can't see it, I won't believe it. Theists respond, not everything real is visible, love, justice, and even your thoughts can't be seen, but we know they exist. At the end of the day, God might never be scientifically provable, but that doesn't mean belief in him is irrational. The real question is, after everything we've explored in this video, what do you think? And where do you stand? Do you find the evidence for God compelling? Or do you think belief in God is just an illusion? Whatever your perspective, one thing is clear. This question isn't going away anytime soon. For centuries, theists and atheists have debated, challenged, and refined their arguments. Yet no side has been able to definitively win. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the search for truth is more important than the answer itself. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Do you believe in God? Why or why not? What do you think is the strongest argument for or against the existence of God? Have you ever changed your mind on this topic? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Who knows? Your perspective might challenge someone else's beliefs or even your own. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss deep discussions like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.